Now let us discuss and understand the meaning of each one of these forms of corporate restructuring exercises very briefly. The first one is merger. What is a merger? Merger is the combination of two or more companies into a single company where one survives and the other loses its identity. Now in case of a merger, all the assets, all the liabilities and all the shareholders are transferred by the transferor company to the transferee company. And the consideration in such a case is in the form of equity shares, debentures, or a combination of two or three modes. So mergers are different from amalgamations. In case of merger, there are two companies A and B. So when they merge, either A would survive or B would survive, whichever is the stronger company, whichever is the healthy company. But in case of amalgamation, when both the companies so amalgamate or blend into each other to form a third new entity, that is A plus B is equals to C, then that is a case of amalgamation. So what exactly is an amalgamation? An amalgamation is the blending of two or more companies, existing undertakings, into one undertaking. The shareholders of each blending company, they become the shareholders of the company which is the blended one, which is the new entity. And the assets and liabilities of both the companies are transferred to the newly formed entity. Mergers and acquisitions together, they refer to the aspect of corporate strategy or corporate finance and management dealing with the buying, selling, dividing and combining of different companies into one, and different companies and the similar entities, so that they can help an enterprise grow rapidly in the sector or location of origin. Now what is a tender offer? This is again a kind of corporate restructuring activity. In case of a tender offer, one party, which is generally a corporation seeking a controlling interest in another corporation, asks the stockholders of the firm which it is seeking to control to submit or tender their shares of stocks in the firm. In such a case, the offer is to purchase some or all of shareholders' shares in a corporation. The price offered in tender offer is usually at a premium to the market price, and it can be either friendly or unfriendly. What are joint ventures? Joint ventures are intersection of only a small fraction of the activities of the companies involved. It is done for a limited duration of 10 to 15 years or even less. The companies may represent a separate entity in which each of the parties makes cash and other forms of investments. It is a business agreement in which parties agree to develop for a finite period and the new entity and new assets by contributing equity. In case of a joint venture, the companies, they exercise control over the enterprise and share revenues, they share expenses and they also share assets, and because of this sharing nature, they are known as joint ventures. They are together for a particular venture for a definite period of time, and once the venture is over, they go back to their same places. They are not merged, they are not amalgamated, or they are not blended as in case of a merger or amalgamation. Sell-off is another kind of corporate restructuring exercise. The rapid selling of securities such as stocks, bonds and commodities is done in case of a sell-off. The increase in supply leads to a decline in the value of the security, and this rapid sale of security by a large number of holders increases the supply of security available for sale, and therefore it drives down the price. Split off is another variant of demerger, which is again a kind of corporate restructuring exercise. In case of a split off, a portion of the existing shareholders, they receive stock in a subsidiary in exchange for parent company stock. Whereas in case of a split up, the entire firm is broken up into a series of spin-offs, so that the parent no longer exists and only the new offsprings survive. Divestiture is another variant of demerger. It involves the sale of a portion of the firm to an outside third party, and in this case cash or equivalent consideration is received by the divesting firm. The buyer is an existing firm, so that no new legal entity results in case of a divestiture, and it simply represents a form of expansion on the part of the buying firm. Similarly, equity carve out is another variant. It is the initial public offering, that is IPO, of some portion of the common stock of a wholly owned subsidiary. They are also referred as the split off IPOs. It involves the sale of a portion of the firm via an equity offering to outsiders. New shares of equity, they are sold to outsiders, which give them ownership of a portion of the previously existing firm, and in this case a new legal entity is created. Similarly, premium buybacks are another form of corporate restructuring exercise, wherein the repurchase of a substantial stockholder's ownership interest at a premium above the market price is done. A standstill agreement is written, and it represents a voluntary contract in which the stockholder simply agrees not to increase his or her ownership beyond the ownership which is there in the hands of the management, which presumably would put him or her in an effective control position. Anti-takeover amendments, they are changes in the corporate bylaws to make an acquisition of the company more difficult or more expensive. Similarly, proxy contest, in this case an outside group seeks to obtain representation on the firm's board of directors. Dissidents or insurgents who seek to reduce the control position of the incumbents or existing board of directors, and therefore in this case usually it is regarded as directed against the existing management of the company. This is the proxy contest. Changes in ownership structure, in such a case the exchange offers, wherein the exchange of debt or preferred stock for common stock is done, and in case of share repurchase, the corporation buys back some fraction of its outstanding shares of common stock. Another form is going private transaction, which includes activities such as LBOs, that is leveraged buyout, and MBOs, that is management buyouts. Going private transactions typically include members of the incumbent management group who obtain a substantial proportion of the equity ownership of the newly private company. When the transaction is initiated by the incumbent management, it is referred to as management buyout. And in case of a leverage buyout, a type of aggressive business practice whereby the investors or a larger corporation utilizes borrowed funds or debt to finance its acquisition. Now, integration or merger can further be divided into vertical merger, horizontal merger, or conglomerate merger. In case of an horizontal merger, two firms which operate in the same kind of business activity, they merge with each other. The main purpose of this kind of merger is to obtain economies of scale, to reduce the investment in operations and broadening the product line, reduction in investment in working capital, elimination of competition concentration, in product reduction of advertising cost, and increase in market area. And an example of horizontal merger can be a merger between two steel firms, would be a case of horizontal merger. Similarly, in case of a vertical merger or vertical integration, it is done to expand, espousing backward integration to assimilate the sources of supply and forward integration towards market outlets. In case of a vertical integration, the acquiring company through merger of another unit attempts on reduction of inventories and it implements its production plans as per objectives and economizes on working capital investment. In a vertical combination, the merging undertaking would be either a supplier or a buyer using its product as intermediary material for its final production. And in case of a conglomerate merger, this is a merger between two unrelated business firms. So, the basic purpose of conglomerate amalgamations remains utilization of financial resources and enlarged debt capacity through reorganizing their financial structure. It also enhances the overall activity of the acquirer company and creates balance in company's total portfolio of diverse products and production processes. Demerger is another form of corporate restructuring exercise in which a case the corporate splits or divides the company. It is a division of the company. It signifies a movement in the company just opposite to merger, just opposite to combination. This particular kind of restructuring exercise is common in developed nations such as UK and USA, and also in developing nations like India. We find many examples of demergers taking place in Indian corporate sector. A common example is when Reliance Industries Limited demerged into various other undertakings. Another variant is, or form of corporate restructuring, is reverse merger. This is also known as reverse takeovers or reverse IPOs, and it is a way for private companies to go public. It is a simpler, shorter and less expensive way to restructure itself. A conventional IPO is more complicated and expensive, as private companies, they have to hire an invest bank to underwrite and issue shares of the soon to be public companies. So, reverse merger is a good alternative to the traditional IPO route.